So welcome back. This almost evening time we are going to be looking at incredible art and how environmental art can actually change the way people think. And I'm joined with two incredible people on the stage. So I'm going to introduce them as I usually do, and we're going to then have a quick talk about the different artworks, and we're going to show you little clips about the work that's been done by Mike and facilitated by Marek. So I'm going to start off with Mike Faulkner, who is a neurodiverse artist. He's the founder and director of Diffuse, a collective of audio-visual innovators working with environmental storytelling across a range of media and art forms since the mid-1990s. I didn't know you're that old. Ah.
Older.
So, you're older, are you? Oh. So the notable projects include Trees, which is going to come out this year, an environmental art installation commissioned by the Mayor of London for the London Borough of Culture and Liberty Festival, happening later this year. We're going to be talking about 9 Earths, which we're going to hear a lot about. We're also, 9 Earths had its premiere at the British Film Institute in London, was later screened at COP26 in Glasgow. It's also been shown in Indonesia. It was developed into a fully immersive experience at the G20 Indonesia presidency. And I have to say, one of my personal favorites from your past, you don't realize that I stalk you, is Carbon Crisis Blipverts in 2007, an animated commission by SOS and Live Earth, which was endorsed by Al Gore, of all people. So that's Mike, incredible artist, and then I'm going to have to switch mediums, and I'm going to sort of like introduce Merrick Wolowski, who is a London-based curator and creative producer. He specializes in large-scale, multidisciplinary projects that bring art, nature, science, and technology together. Most recently, of course, as a creative producer for Diffuse, he's developed 9 Earths with Mike and the British Council, and he's also worked on Trees, which I'm hoping at the end we can hear a bit more about as the next great project. Some of Merrick's previous projects include the world's largest exhibition by Theo Janssen's Strand Beasts, wind-powered kinetic sculptures that walk on beaches, an entirely hollow inside the dark, a series of immersive psychoacoustic sound effects that took place in Cresswell Crags. These were the caves that had the most northernmost Ice Age rock art in Europe, something that Jamie will know a lot about. Merrick has collaborated with many brilliant artists and funders, including the European Parliament, British Council, the Luma Foundation, Tate Modern, Art Rotterdam, among many others. So I'm going to start off. And Mike, you've had an amazing career, and literally my summary is very, very brief. Can you give us some insights about how you've developed as an artist through these different projects?
Yes, I suppose in a way, for me it's quite a subconscious thing, being a neurodivergent artist. Like I just do things that I think I want to do and somehow make them work or not work, you know, as things go. But I sort of think with Diffuse, it was really like in the 90s, late 90s, when London was pretty run down, like most of the world, I guess. But there was lots of empty buildings, people were having squats, doing projections, and we sort of came along and just projected art, and we could show anything we like, and it was just like, it was a really quite free-form artistic thing, and really nobody really did VJing, no one really knew what VJing was, and so we were sort of, it was happening globally, but we were sort of like the pioneers of doing that, and we sort of, from that, we sort of, we always saw technology as a way of looking at technology in a way of breaking it or doing different things with it. An example of that is DVDs. Like when it first came out, you could burn them and do stuff. We realized that the subtitle layer is really just a layer, and you could have animations on top of that. So you could run those at, say, 15 frames a second, and you could actually add an animation on top of an animation. So in effect, we made these DVDs which you could program yourself and interact and do different things. And we released it as a DVD in Japan, and it got bought by Beck in Japan, and we got a call that he wanted to commission it. So I ended up actually making an album with him with effectively 120 different movies on there. Mm-hmm. And it basically, I had full control. Like, he just didn't interfere in any way. The record label was very, very, very scared of him. He'd sued their previous label, and he was just totally laid back. And we did a tour with him and stuff. And I think what was really, I don't think I realized how big that was. It's only when I spoke to Danny Doring, he talked about his son at nursery. He knew the colours of the DVD. When he had the DVD, he knew the colours because they'd been shown him at a or something. So it's like this level, but I'm sort of slightly digressing there, sorry. But anyway, so I think in a way, we were very into doing things differently, like presenting. We almost refer to it as temporary architecture, where you go into an empty building, say like this, put up some screens and do some projections. And it was very orientated around the music, and it was almost, in a way, for me, slightly superficial in a way. I wanted to sort of tell stories and present things. And we had 2006, we had a artist in residence in New York in an organization called iBeam. And I was thinking, what do I want to show and do? And you can see here now, it's an installation called Small Global. And I was really interested in because in my earlier years, in my 20s, I'd spent a couple of years traveling, and I was quite interested to know where the rainforests were, how they were now and then, in 2006. So we got data from the growth of McDonald's, because McDonald's was the driver of deforestation at the time. You can see here some stills. There's some maps based on McDonald's and maps based on. Oh yeah, I can point that way, don't I? If you want. Anyway, so and in a way, it was really, a nice. For me, it was a really good way of giving people information to digest in a very sort of beautiful and seductive way. So people were quite embraced in that, and we also gave them. I mean, it's quite a shocking installation, but it was very seductive. And we made different modules, and this is another module which we did was called Coltan. And I was really shocked at the time about how there was this big war in Africa. They refer to it as the Great War of Africa, and there's like 10 countries fighting. And it was financed over coltan, which is used in mobile phones and RAM chips and stuff. And at the same time, there was like less than 200 Highland gorillas, and there's none in captivity. So the idea that there's 200 of them and then like close to 7 billion of us was just a huge, and no one really knew about it. It wasn't in the news or stuff. So we did this installation for that, and then we we traveled that around the world, and then we didn't do anything with it for a while, and then we got invited to do it at the School of Advanced Study at Bloomsbury Festival, and we made a piece based around fracking. And it was just probably 6 months before fracking was in the headlines. Yeah. And I was thinking, oh, is it good, is it bad? But, clearly it's terrible. And we learned that through School of Advanced Study. And then again, that was 2013. And I thought this is old, no one wants to see this anymore. And then we got invited to show this at a festival in Lincoln called Frequencies in 2019, just before COVID. And, people were amazed by it, and because I think in a way what I was trying to reveal and show was too early in the climate. It was before economic crash. It's like people have realigned and reframed what they actually think about things and realised that we are destroying the planet. And I think this is something else that leads on to our 9 Earths. I think for me, it's always been about consumption, our overconsumption, and really we're framing climate change wrong. It's like climate change is the symptom. If we don't consume, there's no climate change. So instead of trying to fix climate change, we should fix the consumption. And that's the thing they don't want to tell you. They don't want to admit that, you know. And I think that is, you know, earlier on the speakers before were saying, you know, what can you do to mitigate climate change? It's like, I think if we embrace labeling, like if labeling's on products, you get them on cigarettes now, reluctantly. If you had them on products, like if you went to McDonald's and said, you know, congratulations, you've just destroyed 2 acres of rainforest with your hamburger, I think people would think twice about it. There's a disconnect, you know.
I agree, and I also like how some of your artworks are almost before the zeitgeist. And actually, when you say, oh, I had to bring it back because people didn't get it the first time, but the second time they'd caught up with you, which I think is fantastic. Mike, I also love the fact and really admire that you do call yourself a neurodivergent artist. Can you explain to everybody what that means? And also, I'm always interested whether that helps, hinders, or both your creative process.
Well, actually, I've put in my notes there, both, actually.
Is that the simple answer? So,
well,
so what do you mean by being neurodivergent for you? What does that mean personally?
Well, I think in a way, I sort of knew in my late 20s I was dyslexic, but I didn't really know much about it. But my partner, Sarah, encouraged me to do an MRes 10 years ago. And there I ticked the box about being dyslexic. And they sort of, it's almost like doing two degrees. One was my life and one was of how I think and function, and the other one was learning about the MRes. So, and I think the thing is, what I can do is I can think outside the box, I can visualize stuff. We're doing lots of VR at the moment, and I can really understand how the piece is going to be. And I think, I think in a way, it's like, it's great because I can fast forward and do things, but there's loads of obstacles in a way which I trip up on. And thank goodness for Merrick, because he points out the obvious things that I miss, you know, but I'd seen into the details. I mean, I tend to ramble and go off points a bit.
No, Mike, you never ramble. I've never interrupted you.
But what have I put here? Yeah, great. I don't know.
So, I mean, I have to say, Mike, you've given me the perfect lead-in, which is Merrick. I mean, your role is a really critical one because you organise and create amazing art projects. And we understand that artists are usually within the actual process. They are completely consumed by it, particularly Mike. So I'm really curious, what attracted you to Mike? And I say that in the nicest way, you know, sort of about the art, and 9 Earths. And what do you feel is your role in the project?
Thanks. As a curator and creative producer, I focus on facilitating inspiring experiences, both for artists, but also, and most importantly, for audiences. Mm-hmm. And that involves cross-sector partnerships. My interests, as such, lie within innovative public engagement and positioning or transforming passive audiences into active agents of change that kind of have that agency in their own hands and act accordingly. And as you mentioned, I enjoy large-scale multidisciplinary projects that bring together art, science, nature, technology in a variety of settings, be it a beach or a cave, a gallery environment, a typical museum. And all those interdisciplinary projects, what they have in common is that they involve a network of different stakeholders. You have artists who have very specific visions for their own projects. Then you have scientists who have lots of data, lots of information. They would love to share it all with you. And then you have production companies who have their own ways of making things happen and working with the material. And last but not least, and most importantly for me, you have audiences that have their own expectations. And I see myself in between all those agents, all those stakeholders, kind of trying to navigate that sea and negotiate compromises that would provide the most beneficial outcomes to everyone. And 9 Earths is the prime example of such a collaboration. It's innovative in a way. It deals with collaborations and the information that it's provided you through technology. It's collaborative. We worked with over 100 people across 5 continents to deliver it. And what's important for me is also that it's relatable to audiences and it's manageable when you experience it. And I think that's a great moment to see a clip of 9 Earths before we talk more about the inspiration. So if we could have a short 3-minute video of 2 video documentations mixed together, you will see that it's a fully immersive experience as well as a 3-screen installation that you could experience in a typical gallery environment, but also in more open spaces as well. Can we have the video, please? Great, thank you.
There's always something magical about seeing even small clips of 9 Earths. So Mike, simple question, what inspired you to create such an incredible piece of work?
I suppose in a way it was like experiences from Small Global, and that was very much quite a blunt way of telling people, even though it's quite immersive and stuff. But I wanted to make, I mean, I'd read quite a lot of books and I was quite depressed, really. I mean, I found it disheartening and I just, you know, I felt useless, really, in a way. But I read Rutger Bregman's book, Humankind, and that's the green quote you see there. And for me, that he reframes about the narrative that everyone's evil deep down. He said it's the other way around. We're all good deep down, apart from a few. And I just sort of I wanted to show that people around the world are all connected, and we're all feeling this. Something's wrong. Deep down, people know something is going wrong with the planet, and how do we do this? And really, 9 Earths is the title that comes from Qatar, that consumes 9 Earths, and like the US, as you can see here, is 5. So, so am I going slightly tangent to explain a little bit about the boxes?
Please do, yeah.
So the boxes you see, the 9 boxes, really is Qatar's. I mean, this is another interesting slide. You can really see why we don't care about climate change. It's because it doesn't really affect us as badly. And I think that's really what you need to see, really, and that's policy in the UK and the US. But anyway, sorry, back to the 9 squares. The 9 squares represent really full consumption, and each country, like somewhere like Vietnam, will only be using about 1.3, and so they have 1 square. So you see these stories of people around the world talking about their daily lives, and it's the interconnectivity and seeing that we all really are good people deep down. And I think we stood back in a way. It took the option to sit back and just let the climate scientists, curated by Mark, to actually make the statements. It was really for you to be hitting them hard, and we were just facilitating something quite peaceful and tranquil. And I have to say the soundtrack is really brings it alive, and that's from Scanner, Robin Rimbaud. And here you can see again on the mosaics, the background. There's something quite poetic about seeing people's routines in comparison, I think.
It is very powerful because it makes us all feel so connected. And I have to say, Mike, it is very, very weird to see my quotes sort of like 2 stories high, okay? Sort of like, if I'd known that, I might have written them a bit better. I'm going to pass over to Merrick, because this is an incredibly challenging project. I mean, sort of like, it was filmed in so many different countries, and they're not all filmed by Mike, because he didn't go because of the pandemic. How did you organize it all? How did you get material, pass it to Mike? Yeah.
So, as you mentioned, Mark, 9 Earths is absolutely unique because we worked with over 100 people across 5 continents. And it all started as a creative commission from the British Council to mark COP26. And we had 5 main partners across the globe, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Brazil, in Lebanon, and one more in the UK as well. And we worked with them to identify videographers who would contribute footage about their daily rituals, daily life, so that it would kind of go back to 9 Earths and be presented as such. But then, of course, we stumbled on a number of different challenges. First of them, COVID. Then the coherence, if I may put it that way, and then also the dedication. Let's start with COVID. Interestingly, Mike and I met during one of the lockdowns, so we started working online. And we worked that way for, I think, over 9 months. And even though we live in the same city, we had to travel to Madrid for another festival, and we met in Madrid for the very first time in person. So it was really funny, as Patrick, you said, to find the other half of the body and know how tall we were at that time. But also for our participants, COVID posed a number of challenges. Our collaborators in Vietnam, for example, were under extremely strict lockdowns throughout the project. They had just small breaks. And once we got to know what we really want from them, how they could film, the lockdown that they had to follow, the rules that they had to follow, forbid them to leave their houses at all. So even groceries were delivered to their doorstep. They couldn't leave their houses at all. So they started recording through their balconies and through the windows. And, we had to be constantly flexible and adapt to what we could deliver. Then we had the coherence or the excitement from different partners. And for example, in Brazil, they thought that their daily rituals, their daily life is not exciting enough to be included in that video clip, because it's nothing. And interestingly, what we consider nothing or what we consider ordinary is extremely fascinating on the other side of the world. So that was something that we had to communicate and talk a lot behind the scenes to deliver the content. And then we had the dedication, meaning that we received hundreds, literally hundreds of hours of footage. And we are still processing that. Of course, the piece itself, 9 Earths, is roughly half an hour, and it contains a lot of footage, but still it's not hundreds of hours together. Same with the interviews. As you will see, there are short statements, but some of our interviewees, the participants, delivered like 15 pages of their statements. And how you can really distill that to have a statement that resonates with the public, but at the same time is descriptive to what they filmed. And I think that those are the three main challenges, the practicalities. And the challenge that I enjoyed the most is adaptability of 9 Earths, meaning that we have a 3-screen installation, we have a fully immersive experience, but we also have a single screen, more of a cinematic show of 9 Earths that will be screened tonight at 9:15 p.m., which I strongly recommend because it's an edit made specifically for the Meltingpot forum that Mike has just finished, literally like a few days ago. So those would be the challenges from my perspective.
Mike, did you want to pick up on some of the challenges? Because you had to go through the 100 hours. Hundreds and hundreds
sometimes
of
like someone gave us 4 hours and that's going to be a minute and a half. So how do you, to watch 4 hours is usually takes 5 or 6 hours, just backwards and forwards. And then, so I feel in a way we've just skimmed along the surface. I feel in a way we've invented a machine because it was very much like when the British Council offered the commission, when they posted the commission, they didn't really know what they wanted. They had this online digital presence or something. So we invested a lot of time to make it online, and then they started to call it a film. As soon as they called it a film, we're going, great, it's a film. Now we can move on to a film. So, and we can skip the interactivity. But then we started to sort of build it and do it, and then we kept getting offered. So I think it was a case of catching up because we kept getting more and more interest, and they came and show us some stuff, and we were constantly editing to show stuff, and then it moved to the BFI, British Film Institute in the UK, and it was a 2-screen, and they're both 4K, and all this render time was just like horrendous, It's like anyway. So the thing is, it then moved into an immersive installation, and it's sort of like it's just so much. If we knew it as an immersive installation and worked backwards, it would have been so much easier, But we just didn't know, and also because we believed in it so much, we were really pushing the envelope of our time, headspace. I mean, we really, worked for peanuts just to get the thing going. But it was something we felt really embraced in terms of, it was important for us to make a piece that had an impact on people. And I think, that's what drove us really.
Oh, it definitely has an impact. Trust me on that, Mike. I mean, I also like the fact that it isn't just one art project. It's constantly evolving, changing. You're reinventing parts, and you've got so much new material you can bring in if you want to for different countries, different cultures. But I want to go back to the fundamental idea, which is you took a completely different route into climate change, which is consumption. And I really wanted to know, and I personally love the fact it's just normal people. Just normal people, and it's an incredible art piece about normal people. But why? What was it about consumption that really grabbed you?
I think it's because probably me being neurodivergent, I see things slightly different, but this idea of consume. I suppose maybe it's my history as well. I've worked with agencies and stuff, and it's just, there's an element of where they just don't care really. They've got no moral conscience, and I think you can see that we're just. I mean, you can see that with our government at the moment. It's like we're just pushed and ignored and just treated like idiots, really. And I think we all think, and this is the thing about climate change, is and I don't think today even anyone's sort of. I'm slightly challenging here in a way. I think the thing is everyone's saying, eat a little bit less meat, do this. They're not saying, our way of life is destroying the planet. And the fact that China are adopting our way of life and an American lifestyle, and it's our lifestyle is destroying the planet, and our fix is like, you know, Daniel Dorning says that, you know, everything you own gets thrown away within 9 months, you know. So it's like if we stopped consuming that amount of plastic, this stuff. And it's also the perception, it's this idea that we are doing a little bit of good. And it's very difficult because consciously none of us really want to do damage to the planet. You know, we may fly to see a relative, you may drive your children to school, and it's like you feel they must do that. But it's like no one's telling us the warnings. Like you get on an aeroplane, you know, don't open that window because the plane will crash. You know, there's nothing like that there. It's very much based around, you know, carry on consuming. Well, you know, we'll have some nice green products and some soap and stuff. And, you know, I watched something the other day, and they said that 87% of the public in the UK believe that the way they fix climate change is by recycling. You know, they're totally disconnected. They are if you consume it, take it on the basis of consumption. But, you know, recycling doesn't save the planet, you know. That's,
I think, where the role of artists and creatives come in, because you can say things that our scientists can't necessarily say. And that actually swings back beautifully, Merrick. I mean, I'm interested. So how important was it to get the facts and figures within the artwork correct? And how did you and Mike make sure that that was all within that?
Indeed, connecting art and science
of course.
Through technology requires a truly meticulous approach. And I think we are extremely fortunate that we met you, Mark, because you informed the project, the facts that are included in there, and also the way we present daily rituals, the ordinary consumption patterns in relation to the big data that surrounds us and is the climate change through the scientific perspective, really. And I wish I had with me a book that Mark has published. It's an incredible book, How to Save Our Planet, The Facts, which I highly recommend. I think everyone who had ever a chance to read even a little bit of it would recommend it. So if you Google How to Save Our Planet, you will stumble upon a really good book. And we read it a few times, to be honest, because it includes snippets of information. It's not something that you need to read chapter by chapter. The book has multiple entry points. And I think that also informed 9 Earths, that you don't necessarily need to watch it from the beginning to an end to enjoy it, or to have those takeaways that you want to have. And that format of presenting science allowed us to incorporate science into an art piece as well. So it's not only about the data that is there, but also the way that scientists themselves can present science and be open to other ways of integrating facts and figures. What's interesting about 9 Earths as well is that we worked with different scientists, different researchers. We worked also with Professor Julie Doyle from University of Brighton, who works more in climate change communication. But also our team included Professor Kevin Walker from Coventry University, who had a more anthropological approach to 9 Earths, and he researched the video clips to find the consumption patterns that tell more about, to reveal our daily lives in the global context. And we have a short video to show you, if the time allows, to introduce Kevin, who is an artist as well, a technologist. And he founded that really interesting program at the Royal College of Art before joining Coventry University called Information Design. So how information, scientific data, could be translated into a design environment. And if we could have that short video now, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kevin, and I'm an anthropologist, as well as an artist and technologist. In this project, I've primarily been an anthropologist, and anthropology is about people and studying people and different cultures. In this project, of course, it's about consumption and climate change, looking across different cultures. And anthropology is not only about people these days, looking at other types of agency, for example, from technologies or from, let's say, the climate as a whole, the earth as a whole. So looking at things from different perspectives. In that sense, anthropology is sort of about making the familiar strange. So looking at things, from different perspectives and different eyes to uncover the things that we sort of take for granted. So it's also about looking closely at things. And when I look at all of this video that we collected, you can see, for example, that a lot of these situations were constructed. There's a lot of stage direction happening, sometimes multiple takes, or people waiting for cues, or being told to do certain things. So it's really a mix of sort of art and science. And fact and fiction to some degree. So, science is about facts and about objectivity, but the arts can sort of engage us emotionally. So this project has been interesting for combining art and science in that way. And when our whole planet is at risk, I think we can ask the question, what kinds of ways of seeing do we need now? In this project, we've gone for a multiplicity, and that means a multiplicity of storytellers and story listeners, so audiences, for example. So instead of producing the sort of epic environmental visions, of hope or fear that we normally see, we use these sort of micro stories of so-called average people instead of the usual images of smokestacks and polar bears and things like this that you see in climate change imagery. So we want to tell individual stories. And I found when looking through this video that you can't really make judgments about people or generalize about people. So, one person's actions, we're not saying are particularly good or bad in terms of consumption practices. And you can't say, that one person's actions say something about the whole city or the whole country. Even within, let's say, London or Indonesia, there's a huge diversity of people and practices. So that's something we had to keep in mind in this project. But on the other hand, with COVID, with the pandemic, we see to some degree that everyone is the same. We're all sort of affected by this. So that's been really interesting to do this project during a pandemic as well, where we see the similarities across countries and the differences. So we've focused on what we call active consumption by people, so what people have control over. Thinking of people's subjectivity, their so-called climate agency, and their level of involvement with consumption practices or climate issues, or their level of detachment. So how much do they care about the things that they're doing day to day? How much does this affect their thinking about, the climate as a whole? And we find that where you are matters in that sense. So we see some regional and cultural differences in this. And looking through all of this this footage, it made us think about our own lives. Well, if someone was filming, a sort of average day of mine, what would they think about the sort of things that I'm doing? So I think the project, one of the real strengths of the project is exactly that. It makes you think about your own life, your own practices. What we found is that the global and the local are really intertwined, and that our participants, the people that you see in this footage, were really aware of this, the links to what they do and what's in their local environment and how that's connected globally. And these days, a lot of countries are sort of closing off and isolating themselves But this footage shows, I think, this project shows that we can't really look at cultures in isolation anymore. The video in here provides evidence, for example, of a lot of Western influence in other countries, but also it's more complex than that. We see, for example, regarding food or supply chains, they really work internationally in sort of complex ways. So more broadly, I'm interested in bringing sustainability together with technology. So, for example, can we really do a sort of sustainable technology? So think of installations like this and that you see at Sonar. They're quite resource intensive. With people traveling here, they use a lot of materials and resources from different places. They use a lot of electricity. Could technology really be sustainable? Could it draw from nature? Could it serve nature instead of, destroying nature or extracting things from nature? Could we turn that around somehow? I'm interested in things like that. And looking forward, if we look at sort of multiple perspectives and multiple agencies, we can think of things like artificial intelligence, for example, that we're going to use to help analyze the film footage that you see here, where it provides another perspective that can observe and categorize and describe things in different ways. So part of my research is thinking of AI as a sort of ethnographer. Can it say something interesting about humans by observing them? So that's part of my research, and that's been my role in this project, and it's been great to be involved.
I feel like I should say thank you to Kevin. So thank you, Kevin. That gives you a real insight into all the different aspects of 9 Earths. But just to end up, I'm going to ask 2 questions of our guests and then open it up for questions. And I'm going to start off with you, Merrick. So, Merrick, you're a master facilitator of this creative process and the creation of great art. But the question here is, what do you think great art can do? I mean, is it going to help us solve the environmental crisis? Can it actually provide inspiration?
It's a tricky question because art on its own won't solve any issues, but I think it can help us get closer to the solutions, simply because, as it was mentioned, I think, throughout the day, that shared problems hold shared solutions, and we cannot think about those problems as, mine or your issue at all. So I think in that way, even now when I was watching 9 Earths or the clips that Kevin spoke about, it made me think, for example, about the concept of plant blindness, which is a really interesting concept, a term coined in the late 1990s by 2 researchers, Elizabeth Schlusser and James van der Sea, to describe our tendency to omit plants in the landscape, like to edit them out. And some of those videos, they focus on plants, even though we would normally dismiss them. And that's something that happens with climate change. The big question is, why do we dismiss climate change as such? And I think the map, Mike, that you pointed out, that here in Europe and in Northern America, we are kind of least affected, or at least at the risk of climate change effects. But the big problem, I think, as George Marshall, the founder of Climate Outreach, put it, is that the climate challenge is not just scientific or technological, it's psychological. Mm-hmm. And Shuka, you mentioned that as well during the previous presentation, that we just need to think differently. And that ties in with Mike's neurodivergence, like how we can really incorporate ideas from the edges to approach the same set of information, the facts, the figures that we already have. Like everything has been published that we need to know and we need to do, but we don't listen. And I think it's interesting because there's that increasingly significant research, I think, into neurodivergence and climate change and how those two tie in with one another. And in cognitive evolution, there's that theory of complementary cognition, another interesting notion, another theory. I believe it's by Dr. Helen Taylor, that says that our brains over time evolved to process information in very different ways. So we have the same set of information, but we can approach it from different angles only if we collaborate with one another. So it's, again, I think, shared problems hold shared solutions, and that's the approach. And I think one of the stakeholders in finding that shared solution is art.
I have to say, you said it was a difficult question. I thought it was a brilliant answer. So perhaps you've practiced it. Mike, I'm going to come over to you. 9Earth's brilliant project. We know that. How are you going to take it forward? So how are you going to evolve it? What's the next iteration? And also then, because I'm going to let you off the hook, which is what other exciting projects have you got out there? What things are we going to look forward to in this year and next year?
Okay, so firstly, 9Earths. So in a way, I still feel it's in an evolutionary stage, even though it's presented in different formats. It's really dialing down on the detail and just, for me, the refinements to make it that little bit better. And we are going to be doing collaboration with some partners in Korea, and where we're going to get Korean interviews and artists, and so basically that's happening, and really we're going to do something hopefully in Barcelona next year, an immersive space, and we are pushing forwards. We're getting incredible amount of interest. I have to say, it's like we can't really keep up with even providing documentation to show it, but what we really want to do is, and this is the thing I really struggle with, is how do you show 100+ stories in a space? Do you cut down, like for example, the one we showed tonight, it's like we keep getting told 15 minutes is all people can deal with, then they switch off. So, we're trying to cut things down, but do you cram in 100 and then just give them 30 seconds, or do you give 20 and give them longer pieces? So so the answer to that, in a way, is to make it interactive and then give people the control of that. So it really means going back and rebuilding stuff. But we haven't, as Marek says, we haven't had the chance or the luxury to even fully digest the work. It's like Kevin went through all the footage, and there's bits I've never seen, because some of the other partners did the editing down to 10 minutes. We were telling them different durations, so we had no idea in terms of the work process. So I think it's about stepping back and then trying to work out where we're going forward to, and obviously finding the resources to do that as well, because, I could do this for the rest of my life, really, given the stuff. But just to say...
I just wanted to say that the more I watch 9Earths, the more clear it becomes that it's a project of a lifetime, really, because it's...
But you know what? That was just a fill-in project. We just had that. We had some bigger projects that we were working on. We were working on this project called, based on Eames Powers of 10, and I did some development of that, and actually got premiered at Cannes in the development stage, and it's based around, and it was going back to the Live Earth stuff, actually. It was based around animal agriculture and air transport, and it was basically, I was pitching for this film to be made. Well, this came from James Cameron for Paris COP20. What number was that on?
That was...
Quick quest. Does nobody know? 23.
23, yeah. 21.
21. So, and I was going to meet him, actually, and talk about it, because I was shortlisted, and then there was a shooting, and then it just got thrown down the line. But I spent so much time, and that was the point I was the most depressed, I think. I spent 6 months watching gore, animal things, and climate change. I was in that really bad state, and I was trying to tell people, and they just don't want to know, So that's been developed into a VR project, and it works so perfectly that it's made some people angry who even worked on the project, because they found it very overwhelming. But that's something we're working on now as a development. And
in 7 days, we are premiering Respiratories,
oh, yes.
another project that we've been working on recently. And it's an environmental installation or interaction with the real environment, I would say. To put it simply, we will light up real trees outside that would mimic the traffic light system to tell more about the invisible air pollution. So portable sensors will take samples of the air, and depending on the pollution levels, they would light up trees in different colors from green to amber and red.
So I think that's interesting. Again, that's another project that was developed a few years ago, and it doesn't matter how much you do drawings and show people, they don't really want to know. And this is really where Marek's been a great help, because I'm a terrible writer and I'm terrible at portraying these things, and Marek's reinforced the ideas and presented them in the right way for people to actually give us funding. So we had the funding for development for respiratories, and we actually have footage, and so people see it and they're really interested in that.
And I have seen, I've seen some of the technology as well that's going to make the trees change colour. So I'm conscious of time. I think we've got quick questions. So do we have questions from the audience? Question there, sir.
Hi, thank you. That's really interesting. As a writer and a musician trying to engage with climate change, I always find it really difficult to find the right balance between hitting people over the head with a message and getting something across subtly, particularly given the time frame that we're working in. I don't know how you managed that in your project. Well, did you find a way to bring these quite stark messages home to people in a way that had personal meaning and was emotive for them?
I suppose the way, I think what I learned from Small Global and Powers of Us is, like, if you go too hard, you just isolate the person, you make them feel bad. They've got their own cognitive bias to believe what they're doing is right, and you just end up upsetting people. So it was really a bit of a change of direction for me to say, well, and I think I have to say that Rutger Bregman book's amazing. If you don't, even you just Google it, Google the YouTube stuff. He talks for an hour on one of them, and it's just great. It makes you feel refreshed. And I think storytelling and making people relate to their own stories, their own lives, to make people feel. I think that's what's quite good in 9 Earths, because we do the planets. How many planets you consume? You can see people in Vietnam. You can see their lifestyles. You go, well, they've got a relatively simple lifestyle, but my lifestyle, and you can see that. And then you see somewhere like Qatar or Dubai, and then you start to see that actually that's not really a good one to emulate, and maybe I should change my patterns. So I think in a way, I don't know, I'm more subtle in that in a way. I'm still angry underneath. I still want to punch people in the face, but but I feel that you don't get across to them. It's just a pointless argument. And I think it's, we're in a room here where I assume that people are interested in it, but and COP26 when we were there, it's great. But then you come back and you meet other people, and they're in this other world, and I think they just need a big jolt. It's like I suddenly they may say what you want to hear, but they're not really convinced. Their lifestyle's more important.
And I have to say, there's something really mesmerizing and actually quite beautiful about looking at other people's lives. And this is something that I was struck about 9 Earths, is you literally sit there and you just see somebody else's life. And it's just so normal and so nice, even if it's in different countries. Do we have one more question? I'm just trying to... Anybody else that wants to quickly answer the question? You have the last word, come on. No one? Okay, so I'm going to pick...
Mark, I was just going to say, when we started talking, there was only about 10 people here. Can we show... Do you not think we can show the 3-minute edit again? Or have we not got time? I mean, if people want to see it.
Yeah,
I just feel
absolutely.
That you all turned up at the end and it's like...
Sorry, guys, can we show the first video again for the new audience? I love neurodivergence. You think so out of the box.
You could show the 20-minute.
like to tell the audience when, where they can see the rest of the film tonight?
So what you saw right now is a short video documentation of previous iterations of 9 Earths. It's a mix of a fully immersive installation that we did as part of the G20 Indonesia presidency cultural program in Bandung. And it required 21 projectors, multiple speakers, a separate room. And as you can see, we have just one projector here. So specifically for the Meltingpot forum, we prepared a single screen version. It's around 25 minutes, and it will be screened tonight here in this room at 9:15 p.m.
And it's going to be...
And it's going to be a mix of English and Czech for everyone to understand. Thank you.
So I would like to thank both Mike and Merrick, but I also like to thank all of you as the audience. I have been on this stage for something like 7 hours today. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the incredible guys who are hidden at the back, who basically do all the tech. The film crew, who I'm hoping you're going to make me look really good. Yeah, nod, so they've been fantastic. The floor manager. And the team of helpers that have been going around allowing you to ask your fantastic questions. Also the Meltingpot who have been looking after us. And also, of course, all the incredible speakers who only some of them did I have to blackmail to come to one of the most exciting music festivals in Europe. Well, you know, so... And also, just one round of applause for yourselves, because without an audience, we have no one to talk to. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the festival.